Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the panel. This is all, the technology is remarkable, the innovation is amazing, and, you know, we here in Congress are just trying to keep up with what's going on out there, as you can tell from listening to us this morning. But I'm curious to know, and this is for anybody on the panel, because there are some studies out there that suggest that streaming accounts for about 54% of Internet traffic in North America during peak times. Netflix and YouTube account for 37.6% of North America's daily Internet consumption. So which leads to a question, and that is, do we as a nation have sufficient infrastructure and bandwidth to support the increased demand for high-quality online streaming services, and what are the foreseeable issues that arise for our Internet infrastructure in terms of this exploding demand and availability of online video, and what should Congress be watching for in this area, if anybody would like to take a stab at that?
Well, Senator Thune, thank you very much. I think the core characteristic of the Internet is that consumers are allowed to pull to them the information that they seek. So it's all about consumer choice. The information doesn't get into the wire, as it were, unless the consumer asks for it. And so consumers are driving that, that growth of online video. Consumers are demanding devices like the Kindle Fire. They're demanding the broadband delivery of video services. And so long as consumers are able to make that choice in the future, so long as the networks remain open to that consumer choice, it will be a bright future for consumers because they will decide what they want to receive through the Internet.
Yeah. But in terms of capacity, just the infrastructure to handle all this, I mean, does anybody see that as a problem? Does that impose any kind of a constraint on the future growth of the industry?
It is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
We do not have a first-rate broadband infrastructure in this country. We are slower and less deployed than, I think, 15 or 18 countries.
Right.
We also are beginning to strain at capacity. And so I think that all the efforts to free up spectrum, the efforts that I think should be mandated for the widest broadband coverage is mandatory. One way or the other, it will get solved. It would be nice if, in fact, enough spectrum is offered and enough bidders bid it up to whatever they think is a fair going rate, and then they bash each other in competition, for which there's relatively little right now. And the potential then is for transmission rates to be lowered, which would be a good thing.
Yeah. And you mentioned, Mr. Diller, in your testimony, to your prepared statement anyway, that you talked about broadband being ubiquitous, and as somebody who represents a rural area, there are places in the country where that's not true. And I think of the reservations, for example, in South Dakota, and thinking about how, you know, what efforts we need to make sure that we're including rural Americans in these video business models of the future, because there clearly is a I know it seems like it's ubiquitous to many of us who live in places where you have access to it, but there are a lot of places that don't. I had a question on having to do with this issue of cord shaving. Mr. Westlake, you mentioned that in your prepared testimony, where consumers elect to just have basic cable service and supplement their service with a subscription to Netflix. It seems like there are a lot of content providers that are going to have an opportunity to sell their content directly to the consumer, which would allow them to bypass cable subscriptions. And yet many, if not all, of the current online streaming models require you to have a cable subscription. For example, you can't watch ESPN or HBO on your iPad unless you've got a cable subscription. Your cable provider has acquired the licensing rights to stream it. What is stopping ESPN from simply selling their content directly to the consumer, or the NFL for that matter, to sell directly to the consumer?
You mean?
You mentioned it, but
yes.
In
terms of each of these companies, of course, can make a decision whether they choose to sell directly to the consumer. If what you mean is, do I know of any impediment? There are no impediments. It's more a business decision that they make. Some of these services are, in fact, selling directly as well as on an authenticated basis. So it's really purely a business decision on their part. Some have and some haven't, and I would expect over the course of time, there will be more services that are offered directly to the consumer.
Okay.
Simply, Senator, it would be insane for ESPN to sell itself directly to consumers. Because right now, it's selling itself to me. I don't watch ESPN. I pay God knows what for cable transmission. And I am therefore paying for ESPN because 100% of subscribers have to pay for it. So to sell it individually would be something they would avoid.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, my time's expired. Thank you all.